criminal conviction to assassination attempts, a candidate change, and in the end, a decisive mandate. The 2024 presidential election is over, and Republican Donald Trump is all set to become the 47th president. Trump's return to the White House is historic in many ways, but people are focused on his future policies. From corporate tax cuts to steep import tariff hikes and a crackdown on immigration, the former president has promised to push many agendas this time. And experts say it will have far-reaching ramifications not just for the US, but for the whole world. We saw a glimpse of it in the weeks leading up to his victory. The US dollar strengthened against its global peers like the pound, euro and yen. Meanwhile, currencies of emerging markets like India's rupee, Thailand's baht, Mexico's peso, Brazil's real and Singapore's dollar weakened against the US dollar. A falling currency often signals economic vulnerability or external pressures, and a weak currency against the dollar can trigger high inflation. On vote counting day in the US, the MSCI index that tracks currencies of emerging markets fell by 0.6%. Among the individual currencies, the Indian rupee fell by 0.2% to a new lifetime low. Singapore's dollar and Thailand's baht declined by 1.3% and 1.9% respectively. Meanwhile, South Africa's rand fell by 1.5%, but Mexico's peso was among the hardest hit. It dropped nearly 3% against the US dollar to touch a more than 2-year low. Meanwhile, in Iran, the US dollar was traded at 703,000 riyals at one point on November 6th. For experts, this was a sign of what's expected to come from a future Trump administration. So, let's examine how a Trump victory might impact the world economy. First, let's talk trade. Trump has long championed higher import tariffs. He has repeatedly threatened to import high import duties on countries that may pose risks for the US economy. In his first term, Trump imposed higher tariffs on hundreds of goods imported from China. He also imposed tariffs on imports from the European Union. During his campaign, Trump said he wants to put a blanket 10% import tax on goods from all around the world, and a staggering 60% tariff on imports from China. He has also wanted to impose an additional 25% tariff on Mexico.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff, and it's my favorite word. It needs a public relations firm to help it, but to me, it's the most beautiful word in the dictionary.
Mexico is our largest trading partner. And if we put even a small tariff on like 10, 15%, you're talking about tens of billions of dollars, and they're not going to want to have that long. And they're strong. They can stop it if they want. They can do it if they want. They'll probably have to make a deal with the cartels because the cartels totally run Mexico, totally. It's terrible things are happening in Mexico. But we're going to put a tariff on Mexico if they don't immediately stop sending that horrible stuff into this country.
All these tariffs would likely make exports from countries like China and Mexico more expensive, potentially reducing demand. For China, the world's largest exporter, losing US markets would be a blow to its already slowing economy. But it's not only about these two nations alone. The International Monetary Fund projects global growth at just 3.2% for next year, but these tariffs could worsen that outlook. It has warned that in response to higher US tariffs, other countries might retaliate, leading to a trade standoff. Such moves could choke off growth, especially in emerging markets reliant on trade with the United States. In an interview last month, IMF's first Deputy Managing Director Geeta Gopinath said that if the trade tensions led by Donald Trump's planned tariffs come into effect, the world could end up losing GDP of close to 7%. According to Gopinath, it would basically mean losing economies the size of France and Germany combined. The original target for all these American tariffs, from all accounts, has been China. Chinese overproduction and supply of goods in different sectors have hurt companies around the globe, not just the United States. That may be one of the reasons why Trump's successor, Joe Biden, decided to continue with Trump's tariffs and double down on some of them, like electric cars.
We're engaging in a dialogue about balancing growth in the domestic and global economies. And a long-standing theme in discussions about China is the need to support domestic demand, and in particular to boost consumption, not on a transitory basis, but on a, for an economy at its stage of development, consumer spending as a share of GDP is incredibly low in China. Its savings rate is close to 45%. And for an economy as large and significant as China, ending up exporting its way to full employment is something that's not something that's acceptable to the rest of the world.
But experts say imposing tariffs won't stop Chinese goods from coming into the United States. They say China might redirect goods originally intended for the US to new markets. The potential oversupply could lead to lower prices in markets like Europe, adding to inflationary pressures there.
This is not a good result for Europe. Europeans are deeply concerned. They're phenomenally worried. This is at a time of low competitiveness across European economies, when they don't want to be on the receiving end of a very tough and singular American line that pushes tariffs, that pushes them to cooperate on very strict agenda when it comes to China. But as we know, far beyond the very important question of trade, tariffs, technology, tough economic policies, some of which we've already seen.
But while China and Europe are worried about how the new Trump administration will hurt them, India, the world's fastest growing economy, sees this as an opportunity. In a recent meeting in Australia, Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said that Donald Trump's victory will disrupt the world order, and India can take advantage of these disruptions.
To my mind, 4 or 5 important consequences for the relationship and for the business aspect of the relationship. One, there was already a reordering of supply chains which was taking place. It is very likely that in view of the election results yesterday in the US, that this would accelerate. I'd be very candid with you. I mean, some of it would certainly be somewhat disruptive, but we in India perceive it as an opportunity, because having kind of missed the manufacturing bus in the 1990s, early 2000s, this time around, starting with Apple, we are doing better than we were doing earlier.
Meanwhile, for the United States, higher tariffs mean higher costs, and higher costs often mean higher prices for consumers. In the United States, the Federal Reserve has just started its rate-cutting cycle as inflation is finally coming under control after COVID-19. But if the tariffs push prices again, the US Central Bank will once again resort to hiking interest rates. And when the US hikes interest rates, it impacts the global economy, since many countries depend on the dollar for international trade. Emerging markets may be the hardest hit as borrowing becomes more expensive. We saw this in 2022 when the Federal Reserve started its interest rate hike cycle. In countries like Mexico, which relies heavily on exports to the United States, rising inflation and high interest rates could create a perfect storm of economic hardship. High borrowing costs and tariffs are not the only issues Mexico and other Latin American countries face. Trump has also threatened to crack down on illegal immigration. He has vowed to start a large deportation campaign for those living in America without proper documentation. A large part of these immigrants come from Latin America, and the money they send back home helps families and also gives a boost to their economy. Some Central American countries, such as Honduras and Nicaragua, receive about 30% of their GDP from remittances from the US. Meanwhile, El Salvador's 24% economic growth depends on money sent from immigrants in America. This income is also important for countries like Guatemala, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico. Trump's agenda doesn't stop at the economy and migration, but it also includes the two massive wars going on in the world. All his speeches and media reports indicate that the Republican wants to end them, and a major reason for it is the cost. To date, the US has approved over $64 billion in military assistance to Ukraine. It has also spent a record of at least $17.9 billion on military aid to Israel since the war in Gaza began. Trump also plans to renegotiate America's role in NATO. He is demanding that European nations shoulder more defense costs. This is a big ask at a time when Europe is struggling with high inflation and recovering from pandemic-era deficits.
We also have to be prepared about more tensions between the US and China and implications for Europe. So all of this taken together means that a second term in office by Donald Trump is clearly negative for the European economy, especially for an economy like the German one, which is already very weak, which is already coping with structural weakness, and Donald Trump could be the person actually pushing the European economy from stagnation into recession.
From trade to interest rates, Trump's new policies are set to send shockwaves through the global economy. Investors in financial markets are already bracing for the volatility ahead, with numerous flip-flops in the stock markets around the world. One thing is clear: Trump's second presidency could leave a lasting mark on the global economy.
Can you believe that?
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Vantage, live from the White House. America is Trump country again. He will be the 47th President of the United States of America. We're live from the White House, soon to be the new residence of Donald Trump. It was also here that Donald Trump brokered the Abraham Accords. So the voters have a legitimate question in their minds. If those presidents could do it, why not Joe Biden? The Arab voters want to punish the Democrats for supporting Israel. Joe Biden's shadow looms large over this election, and Kamala Harris may end up paying the price for it. This Trump hat, it says, President Trump save America. But this hat is made in China. And this is the Chinese interference that Americans must be investigating. But of late, Donald Trump and the Republicans have made some gains. And the biggest reason for that is illegal immigration. This is more than just a march, they say. This is a demand for accountability. The excitement, the tension is palpable. You can see the security presence. You can see the number of police cars, government buildings like these again fenced up. We're at Harvard University, the alma mater of Kamala Harris. As the night progressed, numbers came in thick and fast, and Donald Trump was soon declared the winner. It's being called a historic comeback. Another American presidency will begin. In Donald Trump's case, his second one.